Hello, hang on a sec. Let me just pause the brutal grindcore for a moment. Okay, welcome back to Paint Like Fiend episode 0. The Tzeentch Slaughterpriest tutorial, where we're not even doing anything to do with that model today. This is thanks to more useful feedback by Joe, who says, can you do a number 0 on assembling? Removal from the sprue, cleaning, checking against the picture on the box, using green stuff to fill any moulding defects, gluing, etc. That would be helpful. Filing down rough bits too. Great, really useful feedback. It means I can actually do something tailored to what people need. So I haven't managed to pull a second 15 quid Slaughterpriest out of my arse, but I did get this Barbarian model from the Warhammer Quest thing a few months ago. Never got round to doing anything with it, but hey, it's a very comparable model on a plastic sprue. Another big beefy Barbarian guy. Can you see those butt cheeks there? They're a bit flattened. I think he has a loincloth over that. So very similar procedure here. Got the sprue, got a chopping board, got sharp scalpel, got a kind of big Stanley knife in case I need to do any heavier work, a pair of clipper wire cutter things, some needle, get open your buggers, some needle files here, quite small, nice pointy ends, good for getting into any small areas, super glue obviously, liquid green stuff and a brush for that. Another useful thing I found, this is a little bit of plastic card with some very fine wet and dry paper glued to it. Very easy to do. Super glue it to the plastic card, trim the plastic card to a sort of useful shape. This is tapered so I can get into small spaces here or do thicker work. This is good because it's finer than the needle files and you can get a smoother finish on it. So let's run through this. Useful first thing to do, which I haven't done and I'm not demonstrating because it's bloody obvious to do, is give the sprue a quick scrub with some hot soapy water, just if there's any grease or any residue from the moulding process. Wash your hands thoroughly as well. If you get sort of sweat and grease on it at this stage, it can be a bit annoying to clean it before doing an undercoat. Maybe going along with Joe said, the first thing to do is check for defects against what's on the box. This didn't come in a box, I don't have the box here, but you could just look over it, see that all the moulding kind of looks right, any details okay. So we've got like a little face on the thing there, that's all good. Just see if there's anything like that looks really crazy or out of place, anything where there's maybe a section missing or just something that doesn't look right. And it looks fine to me. So get started, you've got to take things off the sprue. Two ways to do this. You can either carefully slice it off with a knife. This knife, if you do so, like this scalpel has to be very sharp. There you go, that just went through that like a knife through butter. If it's blunt, you're liable to press too hard and break bits of the model. Another good way of doing this, kind of the favoured way, is with a pair of clippers. These ones are pretty much screwed. They're really bad quality, so use a proper pair, but they will be useful for getting some of the chunkier bits off like this, where pressing it with a knife would be less accurate. So just, this may go a bit out of focus, but just clip those there. Don't worry if there's a little stub left, just kind of tidy that up with a scalpel later. So I'll quickly do this, all sped up. General rule of thumb is always better to leave a bit too much sprue still on the model, which you can take off easily with a knife, rather than taking off too much. It's quite hard to put the plastic back on. Another thing I did, there are some areas where I get down to one thin pin. I can just gently, hang on a sec. Will you stop that bloody yowling, you idiot cat? Excuse me. May get down to one small pin, it's easy just to kind of gently twizzle it just to snap it off at that pin. So once you've got this off here, it's time to start cleaning up. In general, there's two main things to clean up. The first thing is the little bits of plastic left by taking it off the mould. I'll show you these ones. These are really easy. You can see at his feet, got the lugs left there. obvious against a smooth surface. So just take the scalpel very carefully. The sharper the better for this, so you don't have to press too hard, and you can take it off in small sections like so. Obviously don't do it towards your flesh. If you see me doing anything stupid or dangerous, just ignore that. Once that's done, an area like this that's nice and flat, and they should be parallel, good thing to do, a little bit of wet and dry glue to a bit of wood. Just get the model, get it down, hold it. You want to hold it firmly but not pressing too hard, and gently rub it back and forth. So, and that should get, see it's a little bit, it's braided a bit, but that's okay. That's should be a nice parallel thing. You should stand up, look at that, brilliant. So you can see there's bits under the arm where I left a bit too much sprue. That's fine. Again, sharp scalpel. This one clearly isn't sharp enough because I'm going to press too hard. Gently take it off. Take it off slowly, like so. Don't try and take too much of it in one go, because you might take a chunk out of model. Next thing to do, the other thing to do concurrently with that, is mould lines. Now, to be fair to them in all of their money grabbing glory, I think plastic these days it's on the par with saffron. It's worth like 10 times its weight in gold or something, the prices they charge for it. But the quality of these, the mould lines they have now are actually very minor. It's probably hard to pick this up on camera, but there will be a faint ridge line running where the two parts of the mould have met, and that will need to be trimmed off. In some areas it'll be more obvious than others. In areas like the fur here it'll be less obvious. Areas like, I don't know if you can, hopefully this will pick this up. You've got to move it around, even for your own checking, you've got to move it around in the light and see. Areas like this shoulder pad here that should be smooth, there's quite a distinct, if small, ridge there. Best way to do this, classic technique, is you have the scalpel parallel to the model and just gently rub it back and forth. You can angle the scalpel a bit more towards the direction we're going. Don't angle it away like that and try and rub it, because you'll start cutting into the model. So you just do that, and you'll see that the surface will get slightly, very, very slightly rough texture, and that will be a good guideline. When that rough texture covers the wider area, then you'll have got rid of the mould line. And you just go around, you look at it, see there's a muscle there, barely visible, but you run it along it, run the scalpel along it. So you should see that mould line disappear. Going along with this, needle files can be useful in certain areas. So say something like these rivets or metal things here, they could be a bit difficult to go over a scalpel, so you can just get a needle file, run it over. Where there's an indent in the model, you can use the needle file, kind of edge of the needle file to get in there, clean it off. Now, if you find the goodbye needle file. If you find the needle file leaves a too rough effect, or indeed the scraping of the scalpel leaves a too rough effect, a bit of plastic card, a very fine wet and dry in it, and just run that back over like that. Finer wet and dry the better for this. The plastic, it will sand fairly easily. Is there any other examples? Here's another one. Left a bit of sprue on there, again gently snipe it off. And love of God, use a scalpel that's sharper than this one. If I have to press any harder, I'm going to take my fingers off, so don't do that. Then scrape it with the side of the knife. Get a little bit of a lump there, so you can get this bit of plastic card. Run it in one direction, so, and then maybe run it back and forth in another direction, like so. So basically go around the whole model, piece by piece, check it, clean it, file it, take care, try not to take any important bits like arms or legs off. That applies to your own fingers as well when you're working with a knife. So now I'm going to start assembling it. And again, talking about the sort of evil capitalist overlord that is Games Workshop, one thing they have done with the new plastics is they do seem to fit together extremely well in my limited experience. So yeah, this should be, stuff like this just goes on a treat. So shouldn't be too complicated to do. What I would do is just have a careful think sort of what you're going to assemble first. Assemble the kind of like larger bulkier bits first and then the details afterwards. So I'm going to put this on the model first, and then put like stuff like the sword or what have you on later. Always check the parts first, check that they're going to fit. Look for the little lugs and sockets in here and just like do a test, see how that fits. Smaller areas you might need to move it around, so that obviously doesn't fit splayed out like that or in like that. You can have a little bit of a wig and think, right, goes in that direction. You've got to remember, use I guess some marker points. So I think this is a certain distance from the sword tip to the foot, so when I put it on with the super glue I can aim for that straight away and hold it in place like that. If you start moving it around too much to get the best fit with the glue on, you'll screw it up, so don't do that. So to get started, super glue. Why do I prefer super glue to plastic glue? Don't know, just find it a bit easier to, it's more what I'm familiar with. So dry run, check those pieces fit. Do they fit? Hell yeah. Look at where the glue will go, these flat areas around here. There we go. Tiny bit of glue on. Try and get it all the way around. If there's excess stuff, use a bit of tissue or something to get it off. I haven't got tissue, so I'm going to use the edge of this shitty old vest I'm wearing. Proper redneck style painting here. So yeah, little drops. If it comes out too much like it's doing now, you can actually just put a little bit on your work surface, get like a pin or something, actually apply it. With this might be a bit more effective. Then, see, I've gone a bit overboard with the super glue there, be wary of that. So then, using the kind of memory of your dry run, get it in place like so, press it as tightly as possible without breaking it. The super glue pooling a bit, I find a quick blow can help, and this should dry pretty quick. Now what you'll find, and this happens, is you might notice bits on the join here where you haven't got the edge as smooth as you like with the sanding, so you can start rectifying that now. Let's get the wee sanding thing. And there'll also be areas where you want to maybe green stuff or what have you. I am not going to demonstrate doing proper green stuff because it's time consuming and I'm pretty bad at it. At the moment I just tend to use a bit of liquid green stuff to fill in these small gaps. Generally I find this is usually enough. So straight out of the pot there, it's quite thick. Just paint it over that, painting it across the gap, so hopefully it'll fill into it. Then cleaning my brush by licking it, which you're obviously not supposed to do. And this stuff is water soluble, so then the edge here where it goes back onto the model, kind of feather that a bit so you don't get an abrupt transition. This can all be sanded down later on, but this is quite a good start. Again, there's a little bit in there. So obviously just using an old brush, trying to get that to go into the gap. Clean that off a bit. In an area like this, that's in a sort of weird hollow in the middle, what you can do to sand it down later is get a bit of wet and dry, fold it over so you've got a rough kind of U shape there, and just gently sand it down with that, and that should get a nice finish to it. So I'm doing this at this stage because once the weapons are on it, it might be a bit harder to hold. So I figure get this stuff out of the way. Some of these areas again would be harder to get to with the head in place. So as I say, do some of the bigger areas, bigger assembly bits first. Check if there's anything further that needs sanding or filling. Do that. Wait for it to dry, and then assemble the rest of it. So I'll pause this and just show the final aspect of that. Right, I did a little bit more green stuffing on there to fill in some of the gaps. Seemed to work okay. Obviously you can use your judgment on what gaps to fill. For example, there's a bit of a gap around here. I hardly did anything around there because it's a natural deep crease anyway. Other areas like this bit of armour should be a smooth bit of armour, so that had to be filled. So I'm going to glue a few more bits on. I think what I'm going to try and do now is glue the head on. I say try as if it's going to be difficult. That head literally just popped into place. The join they've got with the hair there is pretty good. They've got it looking like actual strands of hair. I will just do a little bit of filing down of those just so they look slightly less cropped edged. So again, this should just pop into place. So what I'm going to try and do is the super glue stop being a dick and just put a little dot on there. There we go, that's more like it, small dot. Get his head, slide into place, hold it in place. As I say, pretty impressed with how these wee buggers go together. Right, another easy one here. I've already tested the loincloth, the butt cloth, or whatever it is. I've got to get rid of this ass here. It's distracting me. Again, this is one that simply pops over like that. And there will be a sort of little crevice there with a join. That's cool because it's a separate item to the actual to the legs and stuff, so no need to fill any of that lot. Sword, this is a slightly tricky one. Now this will be the sort of thing you might want to wait until you actually do the base of the model, but I couldn't find a round base, so so I'm going to leave the sword off until I've got some kind of base sorted. Check the axe arm here. How does that go on? Like that. So this doesn't pop into place quite so much. If you kind of wiggle it and press it around, you should be able to feel how it goes. Just going to do a tiny bit of sanding on these. Sometimes where the join relies on a flat area like here, if that's not perfectly flat, that's the wrong sanding thing, if it's not perfectly flat, it might not be as good a join. Anything obviously like a lug or a complicated area, you wouldn't want to do this. Okay, so a little bit of play here, but there's quite a large area that gets glued, so with the super glue that should hold okay. Tiny dot. Okay, actually got a bit of control over the glue now. Whoops, dropped in, but I had ready for that. So go back to the position I was in, holding in. Just wiggle it around a little bit to make sure it's how it should be. Hold it firm. Now this one I would hold for a little bit longer because unlike the head, it's a slightly trickier joint. Okay. Not bad, not bad. As a bit in here, I'd fill with maybe a bit of green stuff because it looks like too much of a deep crevice by that muscle. So just paste some of that in there. Bit of water, Thin it down and just make sure you're not kind of getting any ridges by the muscles. Yeah, you can see it's a little bit of a hole there. I'll fill that in later. Right, basing. Might do a wee slate base for this dude. Would that look good? Think that would look good, guys? I think maybe a sort of slate base with a bit of snow on it could look quite good. Nice and bleak. So when doing sort of base like this, you need to play around a bit, make sure there's going to be space for this sword. If I do that there, will that be space? Possibly. Do it right in the corner. So I've got a square base here. It'll overhang a bit. That's okay. There should be some round base shit going on, but I can't find the large round base. Let's trim that off. So just going to lightly sand the top of this, make sure it's smooth enough for his feet. That looks like I will get feet on. You can see there, it looks like I'll get feet on and get the sword on nicely. So let's wipe the dust off that. I'm going to do a slightly finer sand with an old nail file here. Don't want to have too much texture on this one, so there's to be the smoothness of the slate with kind of crispy edges of it. So let's test that now. Yeah, that could be good. So what I will do is I'm going to glue the guy to the base first. This is all a matter of trial and error here. So, although you generally want the errors to occur after you've superglued it. Yeah, sorry, before you superglued it. Kind of annoyingly, the sword doesn't quite touch. It's actually better if I do it the other way around. Because then the base seems to just get the sword touching down, which is good to provide it some kind of stability. So what I will do is I'll glue the sword. So glue the super glue to the table. A little bit too much there, so just dab that off on the vest of bollocks. Now this you've got to hold in place pretty carefully. Get the you're going to move it around gently to get where the lug matches up closely, and then just hold it. Screwed this up. This is a good example, right? I messed up a little bit. However, the super glue is not fully dry, so it is possible. Let's put a little dab on. That's far too much of a dab, so I screwed that aspect up as well. Basically, I didn't think the sword was lined up neatly, so I tried to move it, and I kind of opened up the wet glue. So, putting it back on now. Holding it in place, checking the model from the front so I can see his sword is going to line up. He's got quite a strong standing pose, so I think having the sword vertical to him is pretty important. Okay, that's just about in place. I think his pose looks good. So now I can check this more easily on the base. Okay, so now it so happens when he's glued into place, it does actually work well this way around. So I could literally just go ahead and do that right now. Yeah, let's do it. One thing, if you want to get this accurate, is you can actually Get him on the base in the right place, have a good look around, see whether this is the pose you want, and then you could just carefully mark a couple of scratches at his toes. So we've got one there and one, I think is that? Yep. These two scratches here and here give me an idea, so I can just hopefully plop him right back down there. Now, gluing the sword to the base, it has one disadvantage: the tip won't be as obviously as sharp and as prominent. However, I believe the advantage of it actually gluing to a stable surface far outweighs that. So there we go. Can you see this dude now? Go away, green stuff. It's looking pretty good. So I could just plonk him on a square base. I might actually see if I can find the correct round base. One thing I'll say is I chose quite a thin sliver of slate here. I've got much thicker ones, but because he was quite a beefy dude already, I thought we don't need to go too high on that. So there you go. Removing off sprue, cleaning, assembling, filing, green stuffing. Hope that makes sense.